Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Hey there, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Okay, so today we are going to dive into a topic that is dear to our hearts, and also I think kind of an eye-opening topic for a lot of people, especially people who are just kind of thinking about going freelance with copywriting. Now, to be very clear, we teach our students how to land full-time jobs as copywriters or how to land freelance work, or if they want to do both or any combination of that. But today we're going to talk specifically about the benefits of working freelance, and how the idea of there being a safety in working a full-time job is not quite as safe as it seems to be.
Yeah, I think when we have full-time jobs, we often put a lot of trust in the company that they value us. And hopefully, if you're working for a good company, they do, and they value you as an employee. Um, but that doesn't mean that other factors aren't going to come into play where you might have to be let go. I think there's consistency in the paycheck, and I think that's why a lot of people like it. There's benefits in terms of healthcare and 401k and things like that. But there's always that possibility that the economy goes south, or someone gets bought, or downsizing is happening. There's so many reasons why you just never know, right?
I think it's really important for people to remember that as much as you may love your full-time job, or as much as you may feel comfortable there, or you may have put in many years there, or you may be very loyal to the company, when a company exists, its primary purpose is to continue to exist. And if things get crazy in the economy, or if it has to downsize, or if it's or if there's a merger, or any number of things, the company's first goal and first priority is going to be for the company to continue to exist and to thrive and to prosper. And that is regardless of what it means for staff members. And I know that sounds kind of it makes companies sound callous, and I realize that companies are made up of people, of course, but a company is a physical entity. If they can't continue to prosper and thrive, then everybody loses their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means sometimes is that instead of everybody losing their jobs and the doors closing, they have to lay off team members, or they have to, or a merger or an acquisition means that they have to get rid of people who are now redundant, or as we saw in the craziness of 2020, when the economic landscape changes, something totally like nobody could have predicted that in any way. And it wasn't just restaurants and travel companies that were faced with this issue. Companies that had anything to do with basically the entertainment industry had issues. I'm thinking of even companies that had to do with like restaurant delivery, which you're like, oh, well, delivery was great. They still had to lay people off because there weren't as many restaurants. Like I could go, but the ramifications were huge, and there was no way that anybody could have predicted that. But
Mm-hmm.
in all those scenarios, the business's primary goal was to continue to survive. And unfortunately, what that means is even if you are loyal. I feel like I hear that a lot when people have been laid off or something. They're like, I can't believe this. I was so loyal to that company.
Or I've been there for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the company owes you anything back.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know probably sounds a little harsh too, but it's, you gave your work and the company paid you for your work. And that doesn't mean that you're going to have a job tomorrow. Maybe if you've been there a little bit longer, that means that you will continue to have your job. Or at some companies, if you've been there for a while, you're more expensive than your other coworkers, and they're going to let you go first. So that loyalty and that tenure doesn't necessarily, or a longer tenure doesn't necessarily translate to being to having a better chance of keeping your job.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be 2020. I know you and I both left a company right before they actually acquired another company. And the entire copy team that was there, which I think was 5-6 people or whatever it was, ended up being downsized to one person. And I believe maybe someone else kind of, transferred within the group. But it was this moment of like, this is the best move for the company. So we're going to acquire this, or so they thought, best move for the company. Debatable, who knows? But so, it was a positive for the company of, oh, we're acquiring this other company that fits in our portfolio. But it didn't mean everyone's jobs were saved at that point. And that's, again, outside of this, had nothing to do with any sort of recession or with the economy. This was just a business decision.
Yeah.
So it can really happen at any point. And I think the big thing for folks who are maybe doing freelance for the first time, or even, just getting started in it, is that there's this big mindset shift is really what needs to happen from going, from being used to full-time employment to going freelance. And it's, I think one of the big things, at least for me, is not thinking into the future so much. Yes, you want to look at your goals, you want to look at what's beyond, but I think when you're in a full-time job, there is that illusion of safety, because we just think, oh, I'm going to be employed here indefinitely. This is an ongoing thing, and I'm not looking for anything else. And so there's this kind of, feels like you're on this train track and nothing can derail it. Versus freelance, I think you're prone to looking day to day and like, oh my God, I got to get my next client. Where's my next client coming from? And so there's this anxiety where, if you can make some subtle shifts with how you're approaching it and thinking about it, it will hopefully, it'll take time. I've been there too. I think we've all been there of like that first freelance. And I know Nicki and I have talked about this. January comes and there's this feeling of like, I'm starting over from scratch. I've made nothing. It's January. It's fresh. But I mean, I think one of the biggest things is, and we teach this in the academy, is constantly pitching. So if you're setting yourself up to constantly be sending those pitches, you're going to have, there's more likelihood that more things are coming back. And so you have this consistent process. And, I think one of the biggest things when you get in that mindset full-time, you kind of get complacent. And I know that's maybe not a positive way to say it, but I've been there. It's easy. It becomes comfortable, and it becomes easy not to think about anything beyond, okay, this is it. Versus when you're freelance, really taking those actions is what's going to help you get over that feeling of not feeling safe. That's what's going to create your safety.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the reasons that people perceive freelance as being risky is because they don't have any understanding of how you get clients. People think, okay, you go freelance, because people say like, oh, well, going freelance is, don't do that. That's just to find a full-time job. Freelance is scary. You never know what you're going to get. And that's not at all how it works. If you are a effective professional freelancer, unfortunately, I'm sure there are a lot of freelancers out there who are like, cross my fingers, hope for a client, but that's wishing and hoping is not a system. If you want to be a professional freelancer and you want to be successful at it, you need a system. And when you have a system, which is part of what we teach, when you have a system for pitching and landing and following up and repitching and all that kind of thing with clients, and you're doing that consistently, then you are in control of the opportunities and the income that's coming in. If you need to make a little bit more money, if you have a bigger, if you have a bill that comes in or something like that, then you ramp up the clients that you're working with. If you're busy, then maybe you scale back the pitching that you're doing. But when you are freelance, and again, you have to have a system. It can't just be like, oh, gee, I'm waiting for a job, or I'm waiting for someone to approach me, or I'm going on Upwork or Fiverr every day and I'm hoping somebody's going to post a job. I'm hoping they're going to choose me. Those are not systems. But when you do have an effective system and you are in control of your income and your schedule and all that kind of thing. Whereas when you are on staff, you have given up that control for the illusion of safety. Because again, like we were saying, you could lose your job at any moment, and you lose so much. Please don't, I'm saying this to people listening and watching, not to you, because I know you and I are on the same boat, Kate, but don't get us wrong. being on staff as a copywriter can be fantastic. We both have
Yeah.
done it. We've been on staff. We've been on, if an opportunity comes up with a company, then we've taken it because we wanted to do the work, or we wanted to work with the people, or anything like that. But you also can't forget that when you are on staff, you have given up control. They decide how much you make. If you're like, "Ooh, I have all these bills coming in, I want to make some more cash," you can't do that through your full-time job. You can't go into your boss and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna work some extra hours this week, so I'd like you to pay me $5,000 more for the month." Like, that's not how it works. They don't care how much you're working. You're still going to get that salary. And even with contracting, you're usually kind of limited by how much time. Whereas if you're a freelancer, you can say, "All right, I'm going to ramp up the work that I'm doing."
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I love the income aspect too. It just makes me think of all the assumptions we make with full-time work that, I'm going to get an annual pay bump to cover for inflation, or I'm going to get an annual raise, quite frankly, which isn't necessarily a guarantee, versus when you're setting your own rates and you can bump up your work, you do have that control. And so obviously there are pros and cons to both things. And so I think the real big thing is to not make assumptions of either or. We've grown up in a world where I feel like the generation before us, our parents, were very much full-time. The internet wasn't around, there weren't as many opportunities. The gig economy wasn't a thing. And I pulled up a stat just because I thought it was mind-blowing, with how much freelance work and independent contractors and that sort of thing is growing in the US. And so by 2027, 60% of the US workforce will be independent, which is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. That more than half of the people that work in the United States will be freelance or contractors or whatever that is, which also just goes to show you how open companies are to working with freelancers versus people who are on staff. So I know sometimes people are like, "Well, I don't know if this company will hire freelancers." Yeah, virtually every company will hire freelancers. Yeah.
And I mean, as a side note, I think the gig economy, and you hear that word, a lot of people think Uber or, Lyft and working for those companies, which yes, it includes those folks, but it's so much more than that. It's not just having a gig or a side hustle. It could be, but it's also people who work full time as a freelancer versus working full time at a company. So I think gig does it a little bit of a disservice, but.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cute way of putting it.
Yeah.
But you're right. People don't think about self-employed individuals, self-employed full-time freelancers. And that's absolutely encompassed in that. Well, and I think too, that something to be aware of is that if you are on staff as a copywriter, you can still help to ensure that you have some level of control. You and I have both been on staff, but even when we've been on staff, we have taken freelance clients on periodically, not so much that we're making ourselves crazy, but it's certainly possible to have a full-time career, as many of our students do, have a full-time career doing whatever it is that is, and then having a part-time freelance career that, you work with clients on nights and you work with clients on weekends. And that still allows you just a little bit more control, because the same thing, if you need a little bit more money, then you pitch a little bit more, and on top of the fact that it keeps you fresh, writing for the same clients. Kate and I will tell you, writing for the same clients day in and day out, there are a lot of benefits to being on staff, but especially for an internal team, when you're writing for the same projects day in and day out, it can get a little exhausting.
Which isn't to say too, I mean, I've freelanced with one company for over 5 years, which I got to the point where it was that burnout and I couldn't think of it. They needed someone fresh. They needed a fresh brain in that space. And I needed a break. But so, I mean, there are those opportunities as well for ongoing work with clients. And so again, I think these were assumptions I know I made of like, oh, it's just one project to one project and I work on this website and then nothing with that client, which isn't the case. Repitching clients you've already worked with is one of the best ways to kind of, and doing great work so that they want to hire you again. Just say, oh, we found our person. Anytime they have a project, they're going to come to you. And so it's this idea idea of reframing it of, instead of having your eggs in one basket, an employer, you are kind of spreading it among all of your different clients. And, if one of those clients doesn't want to work with you again, or it's a one-off project, you still have all of these other balls in play. Versus if you lose your full-time job, you go from all of the income to none very, very quickly. Versus even if, I lost a really big client of mine, I would still have a very good income. Yes, would I want to replace them and kind of look, again, that's why you're always pitching. You're always kind of prospecting. But there's safety in that sense of, I'm not going to be at nothing. I always have, pitching and other actions I can take to fall back on, which is great. It's copywriting, you have this skill that you can do that. Whereas, some people, they lose a full-time job, they don't have a skill they can go out and use as a freelancer. I would think, off the top of my head, I'm thinking like a nurse or a doctor, there's a lot of liability there. They're not just going to start offering services out of their house. There'd be a lot more hurdles. Whereas, so even if you do have a full-time copywriting job and you don't want to, you want some free time and you don't want to have a side hustle, at least you do have that skill then, if a job lets you go to say, okay, I'm going to start pitching. I'm going to start, who can I work with as a freelancer?
Yeah. Well, and too, if you have a full-time copywriting job, you don't have to, you can still take freelance clients, but it doesn't have to be like a full side hustle. You can take a client every once in a while. You can, but the nice thing about having a little bit of freelancing is that you can scale it up if things go south at the company, but you can also scale it up if you want to get out of that company. I think people forget that, like, oh, well, it's so nice and comfortable to be in a job, but how many people have gotten into a job and been like, oh, I hate this, I want to get out, but I'm trapped because they pay my salary and they pay for my benefits and they pay for all that kind of stuff. And being able to freelance gives you that freedom so that you can start scaling up and you can start getting ready so that at a certain point you can be like, hey, so thank you so much, I'll be out in 2 weeks. Best of luck to you to find someone else to take this role. I think that when people think about freedom, they forget about that element of being kind of stuck in a full-time job. How many students do we hear that are like not desperate, but like dying to get out of their job because they don't love their work anymore, or their company changed their boss and now they're reporting to someone they don't like, or the scope of the work change. That's another piece of control that you lose when you work for a company, is you don't control who you work with, you don't control you don't control where you sit. And being able to get out of that when you want to or when you need to is one of the things that freelancing gives you.
Yeah. And I think to get over some of that scary, those feelings of like, oh, I have to figure out my healthcare, or I have to figure out taxes, or I have to figure out benefits and all of that. I think the best thing to do is do the math. So if you have a full-time job and you're looking to replace that income, okay, what am I getting paid? What, are the costs of the company healthcare plan? If I were to go out on my own, what would I have to pay? If there's a, 401k aspect, there's so many benefits to being a sole proprietor. So we can get to that at a later point, but you can do a solo 401k and contribute way more than you can under an employer plan. So,
and your healthcare becomes, you have to pay for your own healthcare, sure,
it's
but
a deduction.
it becomes tax deductible. Exactly.
Yep. So you lower that taxable income at the end of the year.
And companies give you benefits so they don't have to pay you more. So that when you're working freelance, you're earning more, and that helps to offset the cost of, or obviously completely offsets the cost of your healthcare.
Yeah. So just doing the math will help kind of bring that level down of anxiety, and get you past that freezing point of, I'm not going to take action because I'm too scared, versus make sure you know what the numbers are between this and that. And, oh, this is, all of a sudden it becomes very achievable when you do it out and think, what would I need to, how many hours a week would I need to work to hit this number? If my rate is this for copywriting, you can start to have a game plan for the steps you need to take to hit those numbers and to have those same benefits. You know, I think people think, well, you have no benefit. No, you do. You just have to plan it for them yourself.
Yeah, there you offer yourself benefits.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point, that don't go into freelancing without having a plan for it and without having a plan for everything and without educating yourself. But at the same time, don't discount the idea of freelancing without understanding it and without understanding how plenty of people are doing it effectively, and they don't worry about dry spells, or they don't worry about paying for insurance, it's a perfectly successful way to exist and to earn a living. It's just a little bit different. So don't discount it without understanding what it entails. Because again, if you have a system, if you have a plan, you can absolutely make it work and be very successful and enjoy the benefits of planning your own schedule, deciding once, where this is, depending on when you listen to it, we're recording it toward the beginning of 2021, and we're hoping that again, we'll be able to travel. And personally, as someone who works remotely, I'm dying to be able to go overseas and work from overseas there for a while. And that's something that you can do when you are remote, which I think now a lot of companies, if you're a copywriter and you're on staff, you may be able to be remote and work from Madrid or wherever. But when you're a freelancer, it's not even a question. It's as long as you're getting your work done and you're talking to your clients and you are staying on top of pitching clients and finding new clients, you can do it from wherever you want to.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so I hope that has been illuminating, and I hope for those of you who have been a little nervous maybe about the idea of freelancing, or maybe even a little bit skeptical because no one that you know is a freelancer is a successful freelancer. I hope that has been illuminating, and we've offered
by 2027 you'll probably know some freelancers.
Yes.
It's trending upwards. So
exactly. By 2027, if you're a freelancer, you will be in the majority. So pretty amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun for both of us. We hope it was a lot of fun for you, and that you learned a ton, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyrichriter.com. We'll see you next time.